My name is Saurabh, and today I'm going to discuss microservices with Spring Boot. So let's move forward and have a look at the agenda for today. So this is what we'll be discussing today. We'll begin by understanding what are the various challenges with the microservice architecture. After that, we'll understand what is the need for Spring Boot and how it overcomes the challenges of a microservice architecture. Then we are going to discuss a use case that we will implement practically in today's session. And I will also tell you about what are the various tools required in order to execute that use case. So let's begin, guys. We'll first start with what are the various challenges with microservice architecture. So the first challenge that we are going to discuss is called perceptibility. Now, as we know that in a microservice, there are small components to deploy and maintain, and there are many of them. So there are many small components that we need to deploy and maintain. And at times it becomes very difficult, guys, to monitor and identify problems. Right? If I take the classic example of an e-commerce website, so over there we have multiple small services running. For example, the card service, it can be the product service or the customer service. So there are multiple services running and we need to deploy and maintain those services. So at times it becomes very difficult to monitor and identify problems. So what we require great perceptibility around all of these components. The next challenge is configuration management. Now there is a great need to maintain the configurations for the components across the various environments because we have small components, right? The idea behind microservices is to break down an application into small composable pieces that can talk to each other. So we need to configure these components across various environments. That is also a one very big challenge, guys. Now the next challenge is debugging. Now it becomes very difficult to probe each and every service for an error, right? So you have multiple services running. Now to debug error in each of those services is very difficult. So what we need centralized logging and dashboards to make it easy to debug the problems, right? Then the next challenge that we are going to discuss is basically consistency. Now think about it, guys. You cannot have a wide range of tools solving the same problem, right? And we know that it is important to foster innovation, but we also know that it is also important to have some decentralized governance around the languages, platforms, technology, and tools which are used for implementing or deploying or even monitoring the microservices, right? So I hope you're getting my point. So maintaining consistency is also a very big problem. Now the next point is automating the components. It becomes very difficult, guys, to automate everything because there are a number of smaller components instead of a monolith that is build, deployment, and monitoring. So in order to automate this entire cycle, it's very difficult. So these are the challenges with the microservice architecture. Now let us see the solution. So solution is Spring Boot. Now Spring Boot enables building production ready applications quickly and provides many non-functional features. Let me discuss a few of them. So the first feature that I'm going to talk about is embedded servers. So these servers are easy to deploy with the containers. Then the next point is it helps in monitoring multiple components. So you have various components, you have various services running. So in order to monitor those services, we can do that with the help of Spring Boot. Then finally, it facilitates in configuring the components externally. So we saw whatever the challenges were, right? The consistency, perceptibility, configuration management, automation, and all the challenges that we have just discussed were completely removed with the help of Spring Boot. So let's move forward. And now we are going to focus on how to build a top sports brand. So this is our use case, guys. We'll be building a top sports brand. Let us see how we are going to do that. So in this Spring Boot microservice example, we'll be creating top sports brand application, which will have three services. So you can see it in the diagram as well. So we have three services here. One is Eureka server, then we have item catalog service, and then we have edge service. So these are the three services that we'll be running. Now let me discuss each of these one by one. So the first thing is Eureka service. Now this service will register every microservice and then the client microservice will look up to the Eureka server to get a dependent microservice to get the job done. So what I mean by that is a user will approach this Eureka service which will have the other two services registered with it. So this is basically called a registry service. In this registry service, we have the other two services already registered. So based on what the user want, Eureka server will get a dependent microservice to get the job done. So I hope you have understood that. Now let's move forward and we are going to focus on what our item catalog service. So item catalog service will generate the list of sports brands which are popular in the market. So whatever the list of sports brands that are popular, it will generate that. And then the edge service is also pretty much similar to the standalone item catalog service. However, it will have fallback capabilities which prevent the client from receiving an HTTP error when the service is not available. Right? I hope you have understood this architecture. Let me just repeat it once more. So we have a Eureka service, which is owned by Netflix. And this is basically a registry service. And we have the other microservices registered in this service. The item catalog service will have the sports brands. Then the edge service will basically give us the top sports brand, will filter only the top sports brand. This is how the architecture of our Spring Boot application is. So I've given the numbers as well in the diagram. So the first thing is it will register the other two applications. in Eureka service. So first we'll register the item catalog, then we will register the edge service. Then we'll produce the sports brand names, this item catalog service, and the edge service will filter only the top sports brands. So this is what is going to happen in today's use case. Now let us see what are the tools I'm going to use. So I'm going to use Java 8, Eclipse IDE, Oxygen, and the Spring tools. So let me just quickly open my Eclipse IDE and I'll explain you the code there. So this is my Eclipse IDE, guys, and over here I've already written the code in order to execute the use case. I'll just give you a walkthrough of what I've done here. So I have all the three services that I mentioned in the slide. So we have Eureka service, we have Edge service, and we have item catalog. So I'll start with Eureka service first. I've already written it. So I'll just quickly show you how you can do that. Click on new, over here go to other, and over here select Spring Starter Project. Click on next and just a couple of minutes, and then just give the name to your service and then go ahead, click on next. And the dependency, so we want the Eureka server as a dependency, and just finally click on finish. So that's all you have to do, and you'll find Eureka server already created. And over here, the first thing that I wanted to show you is application properties. So over here, I've mentioned the port. I've modified it a bit. So what modification I've done? I've modified the file to add a port number, and I've disabled the registration. The port number is 8761, and I've disabled the registration, right? Next, what I'll just open Eureka service applications.java, right? So for that, so this is the file that I was talking about. And over here, I've added a couple of notation. First is enable Eureka server above the Spring Boot application. So this Eureka server that you're seeing, I've added that above the Spring Boot application, right? So this annotation will configure a registry that will allow other applications to communicate. Since I want the other applications to obviously communicate with it. So it will basically configure a registry and it will allow the other applications to communicate. So that's all for Eureka servers. Let me just go ahead and quickly run it to show you how it looks like in the browser. So I'll just click on run as a Spring Boot application. And you can see that it has started running already. And I'll just quickly open my browser and at port 8761. So you can see that Eureka service is running at port 8761. But currently you can see there are no instances which are registered with Eureka, right? So we need the other two services to be registered here. So this is it for Eureka server. Now let me talk about item catalog. So for item catalog, what we need to do is again, click on new, go to other, Spring Starter Project, like we have done it in Eureka service as well. Give a name, whatever name you want to give. Then in the dependencies, there are a lot of dependencies that we need to import. So let me just talk about that. The first thing we need to import is an actuator, right? So we need to click on this and we need to import this. So what is an actuator? It is a feature that will help us to monitor and manage our application. After actuator, I need to import Eureka Discovery. Yeah, so I need to import this Eureka Discovery for service registration. Since I want my service to be registered in the Eureka server, so for this I need to import this particular dependency. Then I'm going to import JPA, which is basically to save or retrieve data. After that, I'll import H2, which is an in-memory database. All right. Then I'm going to import the REST repositories. All right. So these REST repositories are basically to expose JPA repositories as REST endpoints. Then I'm going to import web. All right, so here we can see that we have web here. So web will basically is nothing but Spring MVC and embedded Tomcat. Then I'll import dev tools. All right, so this is to auto reload the application when there's any change in the file. Now I'm going to import Lombok in order to, just to reduce the boilerplate code. So since I've already done that, I won't create another project here, another service here basically. So let me just give you a walkthrough of the code that I've written here. So first, let me show you the item catalog application.java file. So this is how it looks like. First of all, the couple of annotations. So enable discovery client is basically to register my application in the Eureka server. Then we have one more annotation, Spring Boot application, right? And so after that, what I have written, so this is my main class, all right? The main class will be executed first in my application. And this is responsible for item catalog execution, the item catalog application execution. All right. Then I have few annotations at the rate data, all argument constructor. So in order to explain you that, let me just tell you what at the rate data is a convenient shortcut annotation that bundles the features of toString, equals and hash code, getter, setter, required argument constructor together. All right. So people who are familiar with Java know all these annotations. Then the second annotation I'm using is all argument constructor generator. So basically it will generate a constructor with one parameter for each field in your class. All right. So fields marked with @ not null result in a null checks on these parameters. Then we have no argument constructor will generate a constructor with no parameters. Yeah, after that we have at the rate toString. So it'll also pretty easy. So at the rate toString is basically, it gives you the facility so that you don't have to start a debugger to see your fields. You can just let Lombok generate a toString for you. And then the entity is basically is a lightweight persistence domain object. Typically, an entity represents a table in a relational database, and each entity instance corresponds to a row in that table. So the primary programming artifact of an entity is the entity class, although entities can use helper classes as well. So this is about the annotations. So the next thing that I'm telling you about is a parameterized constructor of the item class. So let me just write that here as well. So it is a parameterized constructor of the item class, and here we are defining the class members, a long ID and the string name. So next we have a repository REST resource. So basically we have an interface item repository that we are extending with JPA repository. Over here what we are doing, we are defining an implementation of the command line runner interface that will need to override the run method, and this method will be executed after the application context is loaded and right before the Spring application run method is completed. So this will basically generate the key value pair using the for each loop, and we are basically overriding the run method to print our key value pair. So that's what we are doing here. So I believe you have understood this code, or people who are familiar with Java, for them it's not a tough task, right? It's a pretty basic code. So let me just so we are creating an item entity, a JPA repository for it, and we are also creating a command line runner to populate database with the default data. All right, so that's what we have done here. Now let me go to the application.properties, and I wanted to show you a couple of things there. So yeah, in this application.properties, what we have done, we have added an application name in the file to display the Eureka service and set the port to 8088. Now also in the cloud properties file, so let me just show you the cloud properties file as well. So you need to add all of these things in your cloud properties file as well. So this is the Eureka instance host name. Then we have the non-secure port mentioned here. The metadata map to the instance ID. Over here we have it. Then Eureka.instance lease renewal interval in seconds is 5. Then Eureka client region. It's a default region. Registry fetch interval seconds is we have given it as 5. So all of these things will be available with you. If you can mention your email ID in the comment section, you can find the entire code there. So mention your email ID in the comment section and we'll reply you with the entire code used in the video. Since I've configured at port 8082, let me just go ahead and quickly run this. First, I'll clean it using Maven. So I'll just click on Maven clean. And now I'm going to build it using Maven again. So just click on run as, go to Maven build. Over here, type spring hyphen boot colon run and just hit enter. So let me just go to the Eureka server. Let me just refresh this link once, right? So you can see that item catalog service is already registered in my Eureka server. Now let me just go to the port 8082/items. So it is displaying basically all the items present in my item catalog service, right? So let's just go through it. It's pretty easy, guys. So we have the name of the sports brand, right? Then we have again Bad Boys, and we have Air Jordan, Mike, Adidas, all the sports brands that we were talking about. And the size of the page, total elements and everything, you can have a look and just play around with it. So I'll just go back to my Eclipse IDE once more. So now we're going to create an edge service. Now edge service, as I've told you, it is pretty similar to the standalone item service that we have created. However, it will have fallback capabilities, which will prevent the client from receiving an HTTP error when the service is not available. And how we are going to do that? Similar fashion, like we have created item catalog, all you have to do is click on file, go to new, and go to other, select the Spring Starter project here, click on next, give a name to your service, whatever name you feel like, then go to next. Then over here we need to add dependencies. So let me just tell you about that. The first dependency we need is Eureka Discovery. So just type here Eureka Discovery, select that, right? So this is basically for service registration like we have done in the item catalog service as well. So this will be registered in my Eureka server. Then we are going to add a fiend dependency. Let me just type that first. So yeah, so this fiend dependency is basically a declarative web service client. All right, and now once it is done, we are going to add Zool. So basically Zool provides an intelligent routing system. So just click on Zool as well. Once that is done, I'm going to import REST repositories. So these REST repositories, as I've told you earlier as well, it will expose the JPA repositories as REST endpoints. Then I'm going to again add web as well. So I've done that in the item catalog as well. So just click on web. This is basically a Spring MVC with Spring MVC architecture and embedded Tomcat, right? So like we have MVC and MVT architecture. Then I'm going to type in here Hystrix. So this Hystrix, just let me just check it once. Yeah. So it is a circuit breaker to stop cascading failure and enables resilience, right? So that's what it is used for. Then let's go ahead and add one more dependency, that is Lombok. Lombok is basically to reduce the boilerplate code that I've done in the previous project as well. So I'll just click on cancel because I have already done that. You can just go ahead and click on finish and you will find the edge service present here, something like this, right? So now let me just take you through the edge service as well. We know that the item catalog service is running on port 8082. So what we need to do, we need to configure this application to run on a different port. And this is pretty obvious, guys, right? So let me just open this application.properties and you can see that I've configured it at port 8089, right? And I've given the application name for a similar reason, basically to add my service in the Eureka server, right? Now I need to create the cloud properties file that I've already done, right? You can see it over here, the cloud properties file. It is already present. And I need to add some code here that I've done it in the item catalog service as well. So this code, you can again find it once you mention your email ID in the comment section. We'll reply you ASAP with the code. All right. Now let me just open edge service application.java file so that I can find it here, right? Now, in order to enable fiend, Hystrix, and registration with the Eureka server, add the appropriate annotation. So what are the proper annotations? We have enable fiend clients, we have enabled circuit breaker, we have discovery client, Zool proxy, and Spring Boot application, obviously, right? So these are the annotations that we are going to use. And after that, let me explain you the code. Although it's pretty simple, guys, people who know Java will find it really easy to understand. So this is again the main class which Java will basically execute the first in my application, right? Then I have a couple of getters and setter methods defined here. I have an API adapter that will return the array list of our items. And the finally, you can see the public collection item, good item that you can see it in the end. Yeah, this is basically for collecting items and adding it into a list. Finally, this private boolean is great item. This will return true and false if the item is not available for a particular brand. All right, so it's pretty easy, guys. Now over here, I've created a DTO. Now let me just take you through the code once more. So if you notice here, I've already created a DTO, an item DTO, which means data transfer object in this same file. And the lombox at the rate data will generate two string methods, the getters and setters, the appropriate constructors. All right, then I've created an item client interface. So if you scroll down, you can see that we have an item client interface. So we can see that we have an item client interface that uses fiend to communicate to the item catalog service. So we have talked about item catalog service. So this item client interface will use fiend to communicate with the item catalog service, right? Then we have a REST controller below the item client. So over here we have the REST controller that will filter out less than top brands and shows a top brands endpoint. So slash top brand endpoint. So it will filter out the brands, right? It will add a filter to all the brands that we have in order to get the top brands, right? So that's what the REST controller will do. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to start this service for you. So I've configured this service at port 8089. So let me just quickly go ahead and run this for you. I'm going to first click on run as Maven clean. So I'm going to quickly run this as a Spring Boot app and let us see what happens. All right, so let me just quickly open the Eureka server, right? And I'll just refresh this and you'll see that there are two instances currently registered with Eureka, right? So you can see that there are two instances currently registered with Eureka. Now let me just quickly go to a particular port, that is 8089. So I'll just type in here localhost 8089 slash top hyphen brands. And here we go. So we have got the top brands. So we have Lining, Puma, Bad Boys, and Air Jordan, right? Now what I'll do, I'll just quickly shut down the item catalog service application. For that, let me go back and I'm going to shut down the item catalog application. So this is what we have done in this particular use case. Now, if we shut down the item catalog service application, you'll get a 500 internal server error, right? So just go ahead and try it yourself and let us see if you get that or not. It's pretty easy, guys, pretty basic application that we have created, but a lot of things to learn from. Now that's it for today's session, guys. Thank you and have a great day.